Aid to the Church in Need helps Christians around the world who are persecuted by violence and oppressed by terror. Together with hundreds of thousands of benefactors and project partners, Aid to the Church in Need concentrates on supporting the local Catholic churches, thereby upholding the ideals of Christian charity. In 2020, the pandemic has made us painfully aware of how little we humans can rely on our own strength and how much we depend on the salvation and healing that God provides. It was also a year in which we were able to experience the grace of God in a special way. Because Faith Gives Hope, a community of over 345,000 benefactors in 23 countries, made possible that 2020 was the best year ever regarding individual donations to the mission of ACN. Thanks to the generosity of these benefactors, we received 122.7 million euros in donations and were able to fund activities in 138 countries. 79.1% in expenditure was used for mission-related expenses. We keep the share of necessary expenditure for administration and fundraising as low as possible, so that as many resources as possible reach local Christians. ACN supported the projects assigned in 2020 with approximately 68.6 million euros. With a further 12.2 million euros, we supported disadvantaged and persecuted Christians worldwide with information, evangelization, and advocacy work. We were active with emergency aid measures during the coronavirus year, in which 15% of our funding, or 9.8 million euros, was used to support 401 projects. A quarter of the expenditures were used for the faith formation of the laity and training of priests and religious. At 26.7%, construction projects of churches and church facilities accounted for the largest share of funding. Significantly more funds were used for mass stipends in 2020, nearly a quarter of the total budget. Receiving nearly one-third of the funding, Africa was again the priority region for our aid projects in 2020. The situation there is dramatic, especially in the Sahel zone, where Christians are victims of persecution, violence, and expulsion. Europe moved further up the priority list in 2020. Many funds went to countries in Eastern Europe, as many priests, but also nuns, are suffering existential hardships due to the pandemic. Another funding priority is Asia. Thanks to our coronavirus emergency aid, local churches were at least able to purchase protective equipment and cushion their financial burdens. Latin America was also one of the epicenters of the pandemic in 2020, further increasing poverty among the population and causing priests to face added hardships due to the lack of collections. The situation in the Middle East continues to be marked by uncertainty, not only because of the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic, but also due to the consequences of war, jihadist terror, and economic decline. In total, funds amounting to 9.3 million euros flowed from ACN to our project partners in the region, of which around 3.9 million euros alone went to Lebanon. The country, which has always been a refuge and foothold in the Middle East, especially for Christians, suffered a serious explosion in the port of Beirut, which severely damaged the part of the Christian district close to the port. Hundreds of Christian families have lost their homes and livelihoods. The devastation was so severe that we have increased our aid budget for Lebanon by a further 5 million euros with a big emergency relief campaign. Even after 10 years, the war in Syria is not yet over. In 2020, ACN mainly helped with ensuring survival, education, medical supplies, and church reconstructions. We also launched an emergency pandemic relief program for Christians. The prayer campaign, Comfort My People, continued in 2020. At the center of the initiative is the icon Our Lady of Sorrows, Console of Syrians, blessed by the Pope. The aim is to provide not only material, but also spiritual aid to Catholic and Orthodox believers in Syria. During Lent and Easter, the Aid to the Church in Need Foundation honored those who heroically offered their lives for God and their brothers. For example, in the predominantly Muslim north of Nigeria, where in the first 2 months of 2020 alone, the terrorist group Boko Haram killed 350 Christians. Despite all the violence and threats, Nigerian Christians continue to stand firm in their faith. ACN supports the local church during this difficult time with prayers, and helping it above all to maintain the church infrastructure and training of priests with more than 1.5 million euros. Every year, ACN puts the concerns of the suffering church in the public eye. In accordance with our guiding principle, inform, pray, and act, our communication work gives a voice to those who often no longer have one. ACN's Religious Freedom in the World report examines 196 countries, runs to nearly 1,200 pages, and was published in 6 languages on 20 April 2021 for the 14th time. The 1 Million Children Praying the Rosary campaign achieved in 2020 a record participation.
Let's pray for peace.
Children from 136 countries on all continents united for the prayer initiative. 509,771 participants were registered as the campaign went viral and gained an enormous reach. Aid to the Church in Need is the only international Catholic organization focusing on the pastoral and spiritual support of persecuted and suffering Christians. Our long-standing experience and belief in the power of charity encourage us to continue on this path and to inspire people about our work around the globe.